The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show. You can find me nightly live at 9 p.m. on YouTube and on anywhere you can get live podcast video. I'm there. Pat, how are you today?
Doing very well. David is en route to Las Vegas for a radio convention.
Yeah.
So we have you filling in today for him.
Yeah, glad to be here, man. And I see you have replaced the indomitable Lewis. Lewis, if you're watching, wanted to say hello. You're in good hands. The show is in good hands with Pat. Pat has taken care of everything this morning, so we're excited about the broadcast and what's going on here. David, safe travels. Thanks for having me on. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. Donald Trump, I try my best not to talk about Donald Trump because that's exactly what he wants. In fact, some estimates suggest that he got over $2 billion worth of free media during the primaries, which subsequently helped his campaign get launched into the stratosphere. But it's difficult not to talk about Donald Trump. I want to share a tweet that he sent out yesterday, essentially blaming, and now you can see it there on your screen. Of course, there is a large-scale voter fraud happening on and before Election Day. Why do Republicans leaders deny what is going on? So naive. So this goes into the Donald Trump narrative. I've never seen someone with so much money, so much quote-unquote success, be such a victim and cry about the inevitable loss that he's going to suffer. So he's already baking it into the system that the election is rigged, that there's going to be voter fraud. And I think it's important to identify what he's talking about specifically. He's not talking about election fraud, Pat. He's not talking about voter suppression, because historically Republicans have overwhelmingly benefited from voter suppression. They are the ones doing everything they can to make sure that people, particularly people of color, minorities, are inhibited from or stopped from voting by voter ID laws and anything they can think of to suppress the vote. So when he says voter fraud, he's specifically talking about this idea that people are, quote unquote, voting from the grave. People died, he said on a radio broadcast or on a television broadcast, that people who died 10 years ago are now voting. And he's trying to plant this seed as a justification of why he's going to lose, because his internal polling is probably telling him the same thing that every other poll is telling him. He's going to get his butt handed to him in November. And so he's already trying to make the case that it was rigged. There's a couple of things that happens here. One, this is a dangerous game to be playing. We take for granted the peaceful transfer of power in the United States. But the only real guarantee to a peaceful transfer of power is the concession speech by the person who loses. The person who loses is expected to usher his or her followers to the broader American body politic and say, okay, we lost and we're going to support the winner. Without that, there really is no guarantee that there's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. And Donald Trump blaming everyone for his condition, for the fact that he is going to lose and lose very bigly, really sets up a dangerous precedent. I don't know. What do you think? It looks like you had something's on your mind, Pat. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. So, I mean, he just has to save face, because the whole past year or two, he's been playing himself up as this big winner, right? And concession speeches, a peaceful transition of power, is one of the most important things that we have in our democracy. If you look at the 2000 election, it was very disputed. Al Gore ended up losing to George W. Bush, not because of the vote counts, but just because the Supreme Court handed it to him. And even after all that, even though Al Gore didn't accept, even though he didn't agree with the decision that the Supreme Court made, he still decided to accept it. We don't think that Trump is going to be doing the same thing here. He's going to go down kicking and screaming. Right,
which his running mate Mike Pence had to go on the Sunday political shows and essentially make the case that, okay, no, we will respect the winner, But while he's saying that, the actual nominee, Donald Trump, is suggesting that if he loses, it's only because the election is rigged. And I'm glad you brought up 2000. I was there, man. I remember it very clearly. We were upset. And had Al Gore not conceded the second time, there could have been in the most extreme case, a violent revolution against the institution, particularly the Supreme Court. And so by him doing that, he guaranteed the continuation of a peaceful transfer of power, which I think we take for granted because it does not have to happen. And Donald Trump seems to be the type of person that would undermine that peaceful transfer of power. So we want to keep our eyes on someone like Donald Trump. I think there's a lot more going on there. I think it may be some political jujitsu. He's trying to depress the vote. He's trying to even set himself up after the fact. Even there's another image, I think, there from him blaming the media. Media bias alert that he tweeted out. 96% of the presidential campaign donations from journalists have all gone to Hillary Clinton. This gives the impression that the journalists are in the tank for Hillary Clinton. I agree to a certain extent, but these are free moral human beings, like moral agents, not free moral human beings, but free moral agents. They can decide who they want to give donations to or not. But I think this is all part of a strategy trying to make sure that he's properly set up for this media empire that people are suggesting that he wants to kick off after he gets his butt kicked in November. Next story. So talking about Donald Trump again, because we have to. He's the elephant in the room. And so hopefully this will be the last time I have to talk about him. But Donald Trump, I think, is headed for a 1984 style butt whipping. If you were alive then, you may remember Walter Mondale getting thrashed electorally. Pull up the Real Clear average of polls for me. You can see that right now on the national level, and this isn't a two-way race, the numbers are pretty much give or take a few percentage points in the same area with the four-person race with Jill Stein and with Gary Johnson. But in the two candidate race, Hillary Clinton is destroying Donald Trump by 7 points. The average of polls, the highest spread there is the 12 points by the Monmouth poll, 11 points to CBS. This is, Pat, this is shaping up to be a thorough butt whipping. I mean, this is radio, so I can't say what I want to say, but I really believe, and I don't want people to take it for granted, I think Donald Trump is facing the type of butt whipping that he's never experienced in his life. At least not, he's never conceded that he ever lost anything. But this is shaping up to be pretty bad. He's down so much that the Clinton campaign has started investing dollars in red states. They're running ads in Texas and Arizona. Like, there's no reason that Donald Trump should have to spend money in those two states. But because he's down so poorly, so badly, they're running ads there. What do you think?
And of course, on all of these polls, there's some margin of error, right?
Right.
Usually it's about 3.5%, but that could mean that he's doing actually even worse.
Yeah.
That Hillary's up an extra 3.5% on top of the polls that are there. And yeah, they're playing ads in Arizona. They're trying to push for that state. They're trying to push for Georgia and South Carolina. This is going to be like nothing that I've seen before.
Yeah. If you go to the next image, there's a Real Clear average electoral map that gives you an idea of what this could look like. So far, the 256 for Hillary Clinton, those are solidly for Hillary Clinton. There's about 40 that are most likely for Hillary Clinton and 101 that lean towards Hillary Clinton, where there's 112 that are up for grabs. There's 112 electoral votes that are up for grabs. If this goes down the way people are expecting, this could turn out very poorly for Donald Trump. Here's the thing. This is the important thing. I don't think anyone should mistake this to be a mandate for Hillary Clinton. This is a mandate. This is a repudiation of Donald Trump. This is America saying we do not want Donald Trump. We would tolerate Hillary Clinton more than we would ever accept Donald Trump. And I want people to be mindful of that, because the very first thing you're going to hear from Hillary Clinton is that the American people have spoken and we have a mandate. No, you don't have a mandate, Hillary. You just have an American electorate body politic that rejects Donald Trump and would rather deal with an establishment character like yourself.
Well, it's a very important distinction, and you'd hope at least that the Republicans in Congress would put forward the Supreme Court nominees that she were to appoint.
Yeah, and they've already said that they're going to reject. I think it was what's the last guy who McCain. They already said they're going to reject any nominee, or they're not going. They already said they're going to be intransigent, right? Which is no big surprise. The question is, how long will they block the government? How long will they block the powers, the levers of power, to make sure that America actually gets to operate the way it's designed to operate? We'll see. But part of me wants, we have to be clear and we have to be sober with Hillary Clinton, because this is not a mandate. And we hope that some of the good things, particularly her tax policy, it's not the best tax policy, but it's by far much better than Donald Trump's. I would hope that she can get things like that passed. But we really have to keep a watchful eye, because we don't want her to run across the nation with a lot of policies that she feels she's empowered to give because she has a mandate. And I hope this pushes her into a position where she has to recognize the importance of her base. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's how it's actually going to play out. But I really think it's important that even though Donald Trump is going to get his butt whipped in November, it's important that people realize this is not so much we love Hillary Clinton as much as it is we absolutely, unequivocally reject Donald Trump.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. David is traveling to Las Vegas to the Ring of Fire conference. I was supposed to be there, Pat, but life happens. Matter of fact, my flight is supposed to leave this afternoon, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get on that flight because of family things. And, that's what happens when you have kids. You just have to, go with the flow. But David has asked me to sit in. Thank you, David, for having me. Pat, thanks for hosting me. Let's get to the news. Quid pro quo. The FBI released documents connected with their investigation of Hillary Clinton. And in that trove of documents were included a document that indicated that the State Department tried to essentially get something for something, to give up seats, give up overseas positions for their FBI agents, in exchange for the declassification of a particular Clinton email. And so this is actually a mixed story. And it's actually a story of two different accounts. So the first account is what I just described, and I'll read for you exactly the statement that came from a unnamed FBI agent who said that Patrick Kennedy, who is a senior officer in the State Department, offered the FBI additional overseas positions in exchange for this declassification. And so the document actually stated this, and the name is redacted, so allow me to read it as is written. Redacted indicated that he had been contacted by Patrick Kennedy, Undersecretary of State, who had asked his assistance in altering the email's classification in exchange for a quid pro quo. Redacted advised that in exchange for marking the email unclassified, the Department of State would reciprocate by allowing the FBI to place more agents in countries where they were presently forbidding. Finally, at a subsequent meeting, the State Department regarding the classification review of Clinton's materials, where Kennedy was presided, someone asked whether any of the emails in question were classified. All right, so that's a little bit of background. That's the first account. This is the account that everyone has sunk their teeth into, because it literally uses the words quid pro quo. It literally suggests that the State Department came in to ask for a favor for Hillary Clinton in exchange for a favor, which is completely illegal, completely unethical. This is the account, a second, probably third-hand account of an agent who overheard something, but this is what everyone has sunk their teeth into. Even Donald Trump. I have a video of Donald Trump where he's making this out to be something that is huge. Let's listen into that video.
This is very big, and frankly, it's unbelievable. What was just found out is that the Department of Justice, the State Department, and the FBI colluded, got together to make Hillary Clinton look less guilty and look a lot better than she looks. This is one of the big breaking stories of our time, in my opinion. This shows corruption at the highest level, and we can't let it happen as American citizens. So let's see how the press covers it. The press likes not to cover it because the best thing that Hillary Clinton has going is the media. Without the media, she wouldn't even be in this race.
All right, that's enough.
This is
That's enough of that. All right, he's going into his media diatribe. Everything is the media's fault. Never mind the fact that he benefited tremendously from the media, but I digress. The point is, he's trying to sell this as the biggest news in this election cycle, and the media is going to disregard it. He's already sandbagging the situation. Here's the problem. There's an additional document that was included in the same trove of documents that were released that gave a second account of this same incident, Pat, where it actually says that it was not the State Department who offered the FBI additional positions. It was actually the FBI who came to the State Department saying, if you do this for us, we'll consider declassifying, or we will at least look at the email for declassification. So it's an issue of somebody offered somebody something. And I hate to be that vague, but story one says that it was the State Department, meaning that it was somebody for Hillary Clinton, somebody who wanted to look out for Hillary Clinton, offering the FBI something in exchange for the declassification. Account number two says that it was actually the FBI who proactively went to the State Department and said, well, if you look at these positions that we need, we'll consider the declassification. Either way it goes, it has the appearance of quid pro quo, and it has made a lot of people very upset, and it's consistent with this idea that Hillary, email, FBI, investigation, cover up, bad. You know, it's a mess, and it's no matter what the truth is in this case, it doesn't bode well for Hillary Clinton. What do you think?
It could absolutely be concerning. There's just no evidence right now of a quid pro quo because those slots that were offered to the FBI, I mean, there's no reason to believe that it was an exchange for anything in particular. And of course, Trump has to try to play up this story as the biggest breaking news of our time. Really, because he's still recovering from what happened to him about a week ago. That a story that was much easier for people to wrap their head around, and a lot more people could relate to. Yeah, I mean, and that's the reality, right? So simplicity is very important in a media narrative. But the fact of the matter is, we have two different accounts, and it really depends on what side of the equation you fall on which account you want to believe. And there are a lot of people who have gravitated to this is clear evidence that the State Department participated in a quid pro quo, offering the FBI something in exchange. But it's not clear evidence of that. If anything, it boils down to a he said, she said kind of scenario that is very, very murky, and that really, truthfully, the FBI, if there was something there, one would think. Right. One would think the FBI would have dug into that and filed charges based on that. But you go down one level lower and people say, well, that's why the FBI can't be trusted because they're in the tank for Hillary Clinton. My question for you, Pat, is who's not under control of the power and the force of Hillary Clinton in this election? Because it seems like the FBI, the Attorney General, the media, everybody's underneath the influence of Hillary Clinton. It's all just one giant conspiracy to get her elected, I guess. You know, I will say this. I do believe that the media is trying to make a penance for their foolishness during the primaries, giving Donald Trump all of this free media, all this free press. So now it does feel like they are in the tank for Hillary Clinton. But if there's ever anyone to be opposed, surely it's Donald Trump. Let's talk about Amy Goodman. Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! There's really some great news coming out from her case. If you weren't aware, Amy Goodman was on the scene of the North Dakota Access Pipeline protests by the Sioux tribes, and she actually was the one who brought national attention to what was going on back in September. On September 3rd, she was there reporting and getting coverage and exposing it to the world, and she got coverage of private contractors, essentially a private security / mercenaries
using attack dogs on protesters. And I have some images here. If you look at them, you can see the image of the dog with blood dripping from its mouth. The dogs were sent to attack the protesters. It was a horrible scene, and Amy Goodman's reporting absolutely catapulted this to the national stage. That was September 3rd. September 8th, a warrant was issued for her arrest for criminal trespassing. After about a few weeks of this story being out in the public's eye, this prosecuting attorney dropped the charge from criminal trespassing because he did not have enough evidence to actually charge her with that, and instead went with a charge of inciting riots. So Amy Goodman had to go to North Dakota on yesterday, and thankfully the judge said that there was not enough evidence to actually charge her with it. The state's attorney involved, his name was Lad Erickson. He dropped the charge from criminal trespass to inciting riots, and then the judge himself actually said, no, there's not enough evidence. Here's the thing, and she actually said it best. Let me quote her. She said, quote, "By filing the charges in the first place, the state's attorney was attempting to stop journalism." And in many ways, Pat, this is an example of a retribution of the police and the private contractors, the companies actually being angry with her for this coverage, because she exposed something on the national level that was really only on social media, and they pressed charges against her. I mean, when's the last time you actually have heard of journalists being charged with trespassing when they're there to cover a story? I really don't hear that too often.
Yeah, it's just a way for them to quiet her in the future. That's how you know that you're doing good journalism, is when you're kind of breaking the boundaries and pushing the limits of what you can do. And it seems like they were just trying to get back at her and prevent her from doing it again.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was actually Ferguson was the last time I remember a journalist being charged with criminal trespass for covering a story. If you remember the Ferguson protests some years ago, there were several reporters who were arrested and charged for the same type of thing. And it speaks to the need for the system and the powers that be to keep certain situations quiet. Thankfully, Amy Goodman, the charges have been dropped. Yeah, I'm sure it was a major inconvenience for her life personally, but if anyone was up to the task of challenging this type of violation, the violation of the First Amendment, it was Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! So congratulations, Amy. We really love your work, and continue to keep doing that work. We'll be back after this break, and we'll be back a little bit more of the David Pakman Show with your special guest host, Benjamin Dixon.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I think I've said that at the beginning of every segment so far, so there's no need for me to explain. I'm Benjamin Dixon, sitting in for David. Let's talk about the battle for Mosul. This has been a long-planned offensive by a combination of international forces. I think it's interesting that the forces that have combined to fight back against ISIS in Mosul have very different interests, and their interests actually are competing interests, yet they have combined to fight off ISIS and the so-called Islamic State's control over Mosul. And actually, Pat, let's pull up that graph that shows you all the different forces that are involved in this offensive. You see the pinkish territory is controlled by ISIL. The blue offensive that's coming from the government and its affiliates. This is the Iraqi government and its affiliates, including the United States. We have some soldiers that are there in a support role. You have the Kurds, the Peshmerga from Kurdistan. They are coming from the north and the northeast, coming down into Mosul. And then you have Shia and Sunni militias coming from the southwest as well as the northeast. I mean, all of these forces have competing interests. For instance, the Peshmerga, I believe the picture that's on our screen now is a battalion of Peshmerga fighters. Their interests, they are actually a semi-autonomous state that whose interests are to get sovereignty and to have self-determination for their people. That directly conflicts with the Iraqi government's goal. The Iraqi government, because the Kurdistan region actually intersects with Mosul. So the Peshmerga, they're fighting on behalf of their interests, on behalf of their sovereignty and their desire for sovereignty. And they're aligned with the Iraqi government, who's fighting for their sovereignty to push out ISIS. So in general, the offensive appears to be going well. It may last a full week, if not several weeks. But the big question is, how does this region survive after the absence of ISIS? After ISIS has been pushed out of the city, you have all of these competing forces who have different interests and could very well devolve into their own type of conflict. I guess this goes to the statement of the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this scenario, because each of these groups, rightfully so, could be competing enemies, but they have a greater threat in the form of ISIS. If you recall, about 2 years ago, ISIS swept down literally in a storm from Syria in the north and took the city of Mosul. And there's a picture of al-Baghdadi, who is speaking in front of a mosque, giving his orders to all Muslim people across the world. This is actually in the city of Mosul. This really is a defining moment in the plight of ISIS. ISIS, their legitimacy is based on whether or not they can actually build this caliphate, whether or not they can expand the reach of their region and have the legitimate use of force in those regions and control and have sovereignty over their caliphate. And if they lose Mosul, which is one of the last major cities underneath their control, you recall Tikrit was liberated in April 2015. Ramadi was liberated from ISIS in December 2015. Fallujah was liberated in June of this year. So major city after major city in Iraq has been and in the region has been liberated from the control of ISIS. So this completely obliterates the narrative that ISIS is some type of destined caliphate to control the region. And Pat, once you get rid of that narrative, you really undermine their most powerful propagandizing tool, which is join us because we are the servants of God to expand this caliphate. But you aren't really expanding a caliphate if you keep losing ground. So this is one of the reasons that there's so much weight being put on this particular fight in Mosul.
Yeah, if the allied Iraqi forces are able to recapture Mosul, and they're ahead of schedule now, this is only day 2, it would be a very strategic and symbolic victory. They have far more troops, I think 90,000 compared to ISIS's 5,000 to 7,000. And it looks like the last major city in Iraq will be recaptured by the Iraqi government.
Yeah. And actually, we have a graph from CNN that gives you an outline of the forces that are fighting there. There's approximately 5,000 troops, ISIS fighters rather, fighting in this conflict. There's about 98,000 total forces fighting against ISIS. Included in that are U.S. troops. Now, this report from CNN is actually a little low, actually very low in terms of U.S. troops. The last report, 600 new troops went to participate in this fight to bring the total to about 5,000 U.S. troops who are participating in a consultative role. They're there as a support role. But you can see ISIS is completely outnumbered. Here's the problem with the battle in the Mosul. There's still 1.3 million civilians left in the city, and ISIS is already using them as human shields. This is urban warfare, so it's house to house, door to door, room to room. And this is a very difficult situation when you have so many people who can be used as human shields. So this is not a given. The victory is not a given, but with the numbers on the side of the opposition, it's very likely that ISIS will be pushed out of this major city once and for all. Let's talk about the American election one more time. And hopefully this could be one of the last times I have to talk about Donald Trump. But there's something fascinating happening. the evangelical vote still overwhelmingly supports Donald Trump, despite everything, despite his repugnance, despite his language, which I don't fault him for, because actually I cuss probably more than Donald Trump. So, but for evangelicals, this is a big deal, right? He presents himself in a way that's anything but consistent with what they teach and what they are ostensibly participating in American politics for. If you are in American politics to bring a sense of morality, or your definition of morality, to the American conversation, how in the hell do you vote for somebody like Donald Trump? Well, the evangelicals have been answering that in a resounding way. These are a series of images that were shared by Sarah Posner of Mother Jones and the Washington Post on Twitter. And I thought that it was really revealing, extremely revealing. In a survey from the Washington Post ABC News poll from October 10th to the 13th, so last week, overall, do you have a favorable or unfavorable impression of Donald Trump? White evangelical Protestants have they're leading the batch. Not many people have a favorable view of Donald Trump, but 59% of white evangelical Protestants do. Let's go to the next image. Among registered voters, Trump said that that if he were in charge of the law, Clinton would be in jail. 68% of white evangelicals support that idea of jailing Hillary Clinton. Let's keep going. Do you think Hillary Clinton is qualified to serve as president? White evangelical Protestants say 29% say no. White non-evangelical Protestants, 54% say no. Do you think Donald Trump is qualified to serve as president? Of course, the white evangelical Protestants, 67% say that he is qualified. Let's keep going. Do you think that Donald Trump is honest and trustworthy? 61% of white evangelical Protestants say yes, and the white non-evangelical Protestants, 44% say yes. Do you think Donald Trump has a strong moral character or not? Okay, so this is a little less. This is 44%. 44% say yes of white evangelicals, and white non-evangelical Protestants, 37%. That's still a ridiculous amount, Pat, considering everything that Donald Trump shows us. Is there any more after this? Do you think Donald Trump views reflect the core of the Republican Party? White evangelicals lead the bunch. Keep going. This is the one. There's a videotape recorded 11 years ago in which Trump talks about his sexual advances towards women. Given what you have heard or read about it, do Trump's comment on the tape make you more or less likely to vote for him? More likely 2%, less likely 22%, but 76% of evangelical Protestants say that there's no difference. Pat, what the heck do you do with a group of people who say that their sole participation in American politics is to make sure that sexual morality above everything else is a cornerstone in the American democracy? Not just sexual morality, but sexual morality as defined by the Bible is a cornerstone in American politics, but they have, after the fact, stayed by Donald Trump.
I mean, I think there's this whole idea in the evangelical religion and community of rebirth and redemption, right? So they're just willing to excuse him for whatever he's said and done.
Yeah. So two things. One, I mean, I come from a similar community, the Black Baptist Christian liberation theology. It's different in the sense that, there's a lot of differences, but we do believe in that redemption thing. Here's the thing about redemption, Pat, is you have to actually be sorry for what you've done. You have to actually not just save face and try to get out of a situation, but you have to actually believe what you did was wrong. Donald Trump has shown no indication that he is legitimately sorry about this, because no sooner than he apologized for it, he rolled out the 4 women who are accusers of Bill Clinton as a way of saying, I know you are, but what am I? So not only has he not shown any contrition, what we call it in the religious circles, but he's actually has gone even further to show everyone that he has no remorse. And here's the other thing. And this is a problem with the community as a whole, if you can decide and pick and choose what you're going to, what's redeemable and what's not, what people can be forgiven for, and this is how you get the Catholic priest who are routinely forgiven for their transgressions, for their rape of young boys, and then you get no forgiveness for someone who wants to get an abortion because they can't afford to pay for a child throughout their entire life, right? It's like this selective morality that is problematic for evangelicals. And this election has laid bare just how empty, how fraudulent this entire marriage between evangelical voters and the Republican Party has been. It's never been about morality, man. It's always been about how do we get political and economic power? And the religious community found that we can get it so long as we're delivering millions of religious voters to the Republican Party. And they are staying by their man, no matter how poorly it looks on their entire faith. You were saying something earlier about Mormons are actually the ones that are rejecting.
We've been following the Mormon population in Utah, especially, and Trump's numbers are far lower than Mitt Romney's were 4 years ago.
Right.
And I will say this, too. I mean, the Republican Party for the past, 40 years has been practicing the Southern strategy, just trying to coalesce white voters overwhelmingly to the point where they'll win the election. The way that the demographics are shifting now, that's just not enough. You have to win over blacks and Latinos, and just going for the Southern whites is not enough to put you over the edge anymore. Yeah,
I mean, and it really boils down to what a guy that I like to read, Jim, I think his name is Jim Morris. I forgive me if I read him a lot, but I can't remember his name. But he's actually the president of Sojourners, which is like a really progressive Christian outfit. One of the things he said is like, this election is really determining whether or not evangelicals, white evangelicals, are more evangelical or are they more white? Which one takes precedent? And this is panning out to be they're clinging to their whiteness as well as this isn't even conservatism. I mean, I think anybody in their right mind, like, I think conservatism is an anathema to American progress, but Donald Trump is not a conservative. So not only is he not a conservative, he doesn't even know what 2 Corinthians is. He calls it 2 Corinthians. I mean, he is the epitome of everything every Sunday school teacher always told you to avoid and not become. And yet you saw poll after poll after poll, the evangelicals have aligned with him. And this is really going to be a stain on them for generations to come, because they were the few groups. They were one of the few groups that stayed in support of Donald Trump despite all of the things that he's done that suggest that he should be avoided at all costs. And you know what? I think it's simply because people like Ralph Reed, people like Tony Perkins, and all of these, Jerry Falwell Jr. of Liberty University, they are all trying to maintain their control on political power. And the only way they can do that is by standing by Donald Trump.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, so this election has been interesting, to say the least. Jill Stein, Green Party candidate. I like Jill Stein. Let me start by saying that. In fact, for a long time, I wouldn't tell people this because I tried not to influence how you vote. But I'm in Massachusetts, and I'm voting for Jill Stein. The reason I'm voting for Jill Stein is not so much because I want her to win, or I think that she's going to be the best candidate. I think it is important that we have more choices because we've seen the complete failure of the duopoly. We need to make sure that the Green Party as well as the Libertarian Party get to 5%. This is a safe state. This is Massachusetts. There's no way in hell Donald Trump is going to win this state. There's just no way. So my vote for Jill Stein is going to be completely irrelevant in the general election, but it should help the Green Party. But I have a problem with Jill Stein, and I have a problem with the logic of the Green Party that's being employed. Let me start by playing this first clip, Pat, if you would, of Jill Stein at the town hall she had last week.
Steve, are you okay with a nuclear war? I mean, how are you going to feel if we're going to nuclear war? 6 months from now, we could be at a nuclear war with Russia, thanks to Hillary's foreign policy. We've seen what Hillary can do in Libya. Yeah. Hillary says what she wants to do in Syria. you know, it's important not to drink the Kool-Aid. Don't just be a victim of the propaganda. You really need to look at the track record here and then make a principled decision.
All right, that's enough.
If you decide.
There's another clip. I'll let it play in its entirety of her explaining her justification for this. All right, here's my problem. The Green Party has, and many of their surrogates and supporters, their number one complaint has been stop fear-mongering. Stop making Donald Trump to be the boogeyman, because that empowers the duopoly. Because if you make Donald Trump the boogeyman, then that means everybody must support Hillary Clinton. But then they turn around and engage in their own type of fear mongering. Now, we could talk about whether or not a no-fly zone will legitimately lead to a hot war with Russia, and whether that hot war with Russia would lead to a nuclear war. But clearly, there are more steps in the decision to destroy the earth, mutually assured destruction. There are more steps involved than simply saying, if you vote for Hillary, she wants to have a nuclear war. And she actually uses this language like Hillary, she's going to slip very quickly into a nuclear war. How do you engage in fear mongering when you've been telling everyone not to fear monger? I don't know how that works, Pat. What do you think?
So it looks like you're going to go with Jill Stein no matter what at this point.
Yeah.
Really what we need in this country is some sort of ranking voting system where you maybe would put Jill Stein number 1, Hillary Clinton number 2. So if Jill Stein on her own is not able to have enough votes to win, then your vote would go to Hillary Clinton, the next person on the list.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are afraid to vote for third-party candidates because they feel like they're just throwing their vote away. But really, we have to get to a point where people are able to vote their conscience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people should, right? I don't try to influence anyone on your voting decision, not on my show, not ever, because it's a personal decision. Here's the logical problem I'm having with this. If you really believe Jill Stein, if you really believe that Hillary Clinton is going to take us into a nuclear war, how could you sit by and allow Hillary Clinton to win by not taking your voters to support Donald Trump? Because if you genuinely believe that Hillary Clinton is going to end the world, I mean, nuclear war is the end of the world, why are you even in this race? Like, you should take every single one of your voters and give them over to Donald Trump, because as she says in this next clip, Donald Trump, he may be a lot of things, but he's not really a person who's going to take us into nuclear war. In other words, Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils. Play that clip for me.
And one last point, which is this, that it's now Hillary Clinton who wants to start an air war with Russia over Syria by calling for a no-fly zone. We have 2,000 nuclear missiles on hair-trigger alert, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the former premier of the Soviet Union, is saying we are closer to a nuclear war than we have ever been. Under Hillary Clinton, we could slide into nuclear war very quickly from her declared policy in Syria. So I won't sleep well at night if Donald Trump is elected, but I sure won't sleep well at night if Hillary Clinton is elected. Fortunately, we have another choice other than these two candidates who are both promoting lethal policies. But on the issue of war and nuclear weapons and the potential for nuclear war, it's actually Hillary's policies, which are much scarier than Donald Trump.
So, Pat, this is my thing. If I told you Hillary Clinton is 100% guaranteed to take us to nuclear war, are you going to, quote unquote, waste your vote with Jill Stein, or will you vote for Donald Trump to make sure that Hillary Clinton doesn't get anywhere near the White House? It's not a fair question, but that's kind of what's been set up here.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer it directly, but this whole election has been framed sort of as a lesser of two evils. And Jill Stein is trying to say that Hillary Clinton is the more evil of the two because that's going to benefit her. That's going to bring more votes to her.
Right.
And it's interesting how, if you look at the libertarian side of things,
same
Bill
thing.
Weld, he realizes that, he probably doesn't have a chance. They're not getting in the debates. His ticket's not going to win. And he's taking the opposite approach. He's saying, vote for Hillary, it seems, giving a wink and a nod to the fact that we can't allow Donald Trump to be president.
So you should run for office because you're really good at not answering that question. But good job.
I was at least honest about it.
Yeah, you're honest about it. At least that's all the more reason for you to run for office. But here's the thing. They have run this entire election on, there's a lot of great, let me take a sidestep here because I have to give some disclaimers. There are a lot of good things about the Green Party platform that I like. I 100% believe that you should vote your conscience. You shouldn't be pressured into voting for anyone that you don't want to vote for. That being said, if this entire campaign has been about don't vote for the lesser of two evils, how do you then turn around and try to convince progressives that Hillary is the greater of two evils? You cannot simultaneously be appalled with fear mongering and then engage in fear mongering. And then you can't simultaneously reject the lesser of two evilism and then embrace it. There's a tweet by Ajuma Baraka that really set me down this path. If you want to share that on the screen, he said he shared this article, Why Hillary Clinton is More Dangerous Than Donald Trump. Here's my thing. If that's what you genuinely believe, then why are you telling everyone else to reject the lesser of two evils when you're engaging in it right there? So it's just a logical thing that really it's kind of a level of hypocrisy too, that they are trying to be the beneficiary of the rejection of two evils while simultaneously using the rejection of two evils to their benefit. And if we are going to be a principled party, if we're going to be a principled people and stand based on logic, then we have to be genuine in this and not engage in the very thing we're telling people not to engage themselves in. So again, all of that to say, I'm sorry, it's just something that obviously you can tell bothers me, but you know, it's the level of hypocrisy. Unfortunately, my job on my show, what I do every night is I call out BS when I see BS. I call out hypocrisy when I see it, even when it's coming from a candidate that I support. I am voting for Jill Stein. If I was in a swing state, I would not. I don't know if I could say that. Because to me, I do believe that Trump is the greater evil. But I'm in Massachusetts, so Jill Stein, I want the Green Party to get 5%, and that's why I'm supporting her. But when BS comes my way, Pat, I've got to call it.
Yeah, it seems like you're more voting for the Green Party than Jill Stein in particular. If they're able to get 5%, that would guarantee them a spot on the ballot for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
I mean, and I think more choices. What we need in our democracy, because of the failure of the duopoly, the failure of the ruling class, we need more choices, and we need America to be exposed to more choices. So yeah, that's absolutely right. You said it better than I did. I'm supporting the Green Party in Massachusetts because I can do so without helping Donald Trump. But I am also supporting them because we need more choices in our American democracy. Let's talk about someone I consider to be a madman, Alex Jones. Alex Jones has made it to the big league, ladies and gentlemen. He has his own attack ad from a pro-Hillary Clinton super PAC. Roll the footage for me. This is Alex Jones.
I will not let you down. You will be very, very impressed, I hope. And I think we'll be speaking a lot.
Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake, with actors, in my view, manufactured.
I will not let you down.
The official story is a fable, and that inside job is the only explanation.
You will be very, very impressed, I hope.
They're the ones running ISIS. I mean, I've interviewed the cops and the people that saw the feds plant the bombs in Oklahoma City.
I think we'll be speaking a lot.
I think she's going to show up. And on drugs, though. She's gonna be whacked out.
I will not let you down.
She's a frickin' demon, and she stinks, and so does Obama. And I go, like what? Sulfur. Now, I have the government documents where they said they're going to encourage homosexuality with chemicals so that people don't have children.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. And I'll tell you, it is surreal.
Man, wow. I don't know what to say about that other than he's very successful, right? He has a thriving YouTube channel, so congratulations on that. But I don't know if that's an indictment against America, or is that an indictment against people who are on YouTube? I'm on YouTube, so I benefit from it as well. But man, do you think this is this elevating Alex Jones to a level that he should not be elevated to? Or is this just a way of alarming people to say this is the type of insanity that Donald Trump buys into?
Well, it's interesting because Alex Jones's viewpoints really don't line up too well with Trump's. And just when Trump was becoming popular and it seemed like he was going to win the Republican nomination, that's when he kind of boarded the Trump train, so to speak. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's interesting that Trump is able to give credence to the things that Alex Jones is saying, when really this guy deserves no attention from any major presidential candidate whatsoever, with the conspiracy theories and the harmful things that he said.
I mean, Sandy Hook, that's not a laughing matter, right? That was a extremely tragic situation. He goes into the propaganda of being a false flag to get people's guns, right? And then it was all staged. 9/11 thinks it was well, I won't even talk about that because then we might get attacked by a lot of people who believe that it was an inside job. But, you know, it really, I agree with you. He should not be elevated to the level of any national prominence, especially from a presidential candidate. But Donald Trump has brought this entire group of Americans from the dredges of society into the limelight. So what do you do with it now? Do we warn people and say this is a type of insanity, or do we just keep ignoring it when this is really, you know, you have Alex Jones, you have Paul Jones, whatever I forgot his middle name, from YouTube. You have Breitbart. You have all of these outlets that are extreme right, alt-right, who are supporting Donald Trump, fueling his rise. Do we just ignore them?
And of course, too, Steve Bannon and Roger Ailes are major players in his campaign. And it really probably goes to the fact that once he loses, if he loses, he's probably going to create this big media empire and call it Trump TV.
Yeah. And I mean, what better to go on Trump TV? He's not going to get the Bill O'Reillys, right? He's not going to get, you know, the Megyn Kelly ever, right? But he can definitely get someone like Sean Hannity. He can get Tommy Lauren of The Blaze. He can get anyone from Breitbart to be a part of this media empire. So he can get Alex Jones, right? Alex Jones would love to be on Trump TV, a nationally syndicated, nationwide cable access program, whatever you want to call it. Alex Jones would love to be there, and Donald Trump is the just the right conduit to bring this type of insanity to the national stage in a way that it's never been, well, in my recent memory, has it ever been on the national stage. So listen, folks, it's been a pleasure sitting in with you today. David will be back tomorrow. Pat, it's been a pleasure, man. You have a really great take on a lot of things, man. Thanks for joining the conversation with me.
Absolutely, and I'll be sure to watch more on the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Yeah, folks, do that. Follow me, subscribe to the channel. I'm sure Dave wouldn't mind dropping a link in the description to my channel. Also, you can follow me over at the BPD Show on Twitter. We are lit over there. You may not want to follow me if you don't like controversial things. So if you do like controversial things and good conversations, come over there on Twitter or go to thebenjamindixonshow.com. I am not like Alex Jones. I try to appeal to reason and logic. Maybe that's why I only have a handful of subscribers on YouTube, but to thine own self be true. Pat, it's been a pleasure. Dave, I'll see you when you get back. And you all have a great rest of your day.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.